Last March 3 to 2023, Mr. President, we celebrated World Wildlife Day. It is a United Nations International Day to celebrate all the world's wild animals and plants and the contribution they make to our lives and the health of this planet. The World Wildlife Day is a celebration of the birth of the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, which we ratified in 1981. The convention seeks to prevent extinction of species affected by trade. However, Mr. President, as we celebrated World Wildlife Day, our maritime commercial activities threatened and may likely cause tragedy to global maritime diversity. In the past month, Mr. President, we have been riddled with maritime incidents. On February 10 of this year, LCT Pacifica 1, a cargo ship, capsized off Surigao del Norte while traversing the waters between Hinatuan Island and Bucas Grande Island. According to the Philippine Coast Guard, it was slammed by big waves about 3 meters high, and the waters then entered the engine room of the vessel, which caused an engine trouble. The Philippine Coast Guard is still assessing the situation as to whether it could cause an oil spill. On February 27, MB Manfel Carrier 5, a bulk carrier vessel, ran aground Lubang Island, Occidental Mindoro. According to the Philippine Coast Guard, it departed from Subic, Zambales, going to Bawan, Batangas, when it encountered engine trouble while traversing the vicinity waters of Fortune Island. It was hit by large waves which caused it to drift towards Lubang and run aground. The incident caused damage to the coral reefs. On February 28 of this year, likewise, Mr. President, MV Starlight Saturn, a roll-on, roll-off vessel, ran aground in the shallow waters of Bohol. According to the Philippine Coast Guard, the vessel ran aground at the Danahon Bank. A while ago, the wife of former Governor Chato was here, Kalituban and Talibon in Bohol, while en route to Pier 5 in Naga City from a port in Surigao. The accident caused damage to the reefs. Earlier that day, February 28, MT Princess Empress, an oil tanker sank off between Romblon and Oriental Mindoro with her 800,000 liters industrial fuel cargo. According to the Philippine Coast Guard, initial investigation revealed that the distressed motor tanker encountered engine trouble causing due to overheating. It then drifted towards the vicinity waters of Balingawan Point due to rough sea conditions until it submerged. After MV Princess sank, an oil slick emerged, which has now spread over 24 square kilometers. According to the DNR, within the 40-kilometer radius from the epicenter is home to approximately 591 hectares of coral reefs, 1,626 hectares of mangroves, and 382 hectares of seagrass seaweeds. There are also 21 locally managed marine protected areas located in the city of Calapan, 4 towns in the towns of Nahuan, Pola, 4 in Pinamalayan, 2 in Gloria in Oriental Mindoro, and the town of Gasan in Marinduque province. It has already affected 9 towns in Oriental Mindoro. These are Nahuan, Pola, Pinamalayan, Gloria, Basud, Bungabong, Rojas, Mansalay, and Bulalakaw. It was also reported that it has now reached the province of Antique. The Provincial Agriculture Office reported the sightings of dead fishes and seabirds in the shorelands of Pola, Nauhan, and Pinamalayan towns. The PDRRMO of Oriental Mindoro reported more than 10,000 families were affected by the oil spill. There are also reports of residents falling ill. The Department of Health is now assessing whether water from the deep wells, shallow tube wells, and water pumps and other sources of water are already contaminated by the oil spill. Due to the oil spill, Mr. President, fishing now has been banned by Governor Dolor of Mindoro Oriental, who have around 18,000 registered fishermen in his province. An oil spill of this magnitude was last experienced in 2006 when MT Solar One sank off the coast of Guimaras, which carried 2.1 million liters of bunker fuel. It affected 1,500 hectares of the local ecosystem and affected comprised of mangroves, seagrass, and coral reefs. It ended the livelihood of 20,000 fishermen and required a long period of rehabilitation. Ngayon, Mr. President, nangyari na naman po ito. The current oil spill trajectory model by marine experts projected approximately 20,000 hectares of coral reef, 9,900 hectares of mangroves, 6,000 hectares of seagrass may be affected, and the oil spill may potentially reach as far as the shores of Palawan. This is more far-reaching than the damage caused by empty Solar One years ago. Under UNCLOS, Mr. President, we have the obligation to protect and preserve the marine environment and enact measures to deal with all sources to prevent, reduce, and control pollution of the marine environment. These maritime incidents could have been prevented. In LCT Pacifica 1, the huge waves caused engine trouble. In MB Manfel Carrier 5, MB Mariel Carrier 5 also encountered engine trouble. For MB Starlight Saturn, the cause is still being determined by the Coast Guard. In MT Princess Empress, it had engine trouble due to overheating. Under Executive Order 125, as amended, Marina is mandated to undertake safety regulatory functions pertaining to vessel operations. Under Republic Act number 9993, or the Philippine Coast Guard Law of 2000, the Philippine Coast Guard is mandated to enforce all maritime laws. The question, Mr. President, is, were LCT Pacifica 1, MV Manfel Carrier 5, MV Starlight Saturn, and MT Princess Empress found to be seaworthy by the regulatory agencies? In insurance law, seaworthiness is defined by the Supreme Court ruling in Santiago Lighterage Corporation versus Court of Appeals as follows. To be seaworthy, a vessel must have that degree of fitness which an ordinary, careful, and prudent owner would require his vessel to have at the commencement of her voyage, having regard to all probable circumstances of it. Thus, the degree of seaworthiness varies in relation to the contemplated voyage. Crossing the Atlantic calls for stronger equipment than sailing across the Visayan Sea. It is easier to consider that once the necessary degree of seaworthiness has been ascertained, this obligation is an absolute one. The undertaking is that the vessel is actually seaworthy. It is no excuse that the ship owner took every possible precaution to make her so if, in fact, he failed, unquote. If seaworthiness is relative to the circumstances, then the standards of seaworthiness should be higher during the amihan season. In fact, last February 22, Pagasa advised fishing boats and small vessels not to venture into the sea, and larger sea vessels have been alerted against big waves. Bakit po pinayagan sila? Now it can no longer be prevented. Or the oil spill by the sinking MT Princess will devastate our marine ecosystem. The coral reef, the mangrove areas, and the marine protected areas are breeding grounds of fish, which are among our top sources of food. According to the BIFAR, and this can be confirmed by Senator Cynthia Villar, marine municipal fisheries output for the entire country reached 946.88 thousand metric tons in 2022. The oil spill is occurring in major fishing areas and is spreading to pristine fishing breeding grounds. It threatens the Verde Island Passage and one of the country's richest areas of biodiversity, and might even reach the world-famous Boracay. Our loss is not poor when it comes to oil pollution. We have RA 9993, the Philippine Coast Guard Law, the National Oil Pollution Operations Center Decree, PD 979, the Marine Pollution Decree of 1976, RA 10654, the Amended Fisheries Code of the Philippines, RA 9275, the Philippine Clean Water Act of 2004, RA 9483, the Oil Pollution Compensation Act of 2007, RA 10121, the Philippine Disaster Reduction Management Act of 2010. Mr. President, the Philippine Coast Guard is the responsible agency for preventing and controlling pollution in the country's territorial waters. It made a National Oil Spill Contingency Plan, or the NOSCP. However, the policy for combating oil spill is limited because of lack of resources. While we are seeking accountability, our efforts in the meantime, should be focused on the containment of the oil spill to prevent it from causing further irreversible damage to our marine ecosystem. Next should be the recovery. Ito rin po siguro ang dahilan, Mr. President, kung kaya nangailangan na ng tulong si Secretary Bautista ng DOTR sa bansang Japan para mabawasan ang oil spill. As we have experience in the Guimaras oil spill, recovery and rehabilitation will be extensive. It will affect not just the marine ecosystem, but all those who depends on it. Those who will be primarily affected will be the fishermen and their families. Today, 18,000 fishermen lost their livelihood. If we fail to contain the oil spill, it will affect thousands more. But as we have done again and again, we will rise as a nation and face this tragedy as one. Salamat po, Mr. President.